Good morning. Great to be with you on a lovely fall morning. Not sure how many more we'll have, but the weather has been quite nice here lately. So hope you're getting out there and enjoying that as much as you can. This morning I thought we'd take a look at the idea of counterfeit religion and look at the account of Jeroboam and Rehoboam over in the Old Testament. Our proof text will come from 1 Kings chapter 12, verses 25 through 33. 1 Kings chapter 12, 25 through 33. I'll be reading from the New King James this morning. It said, Then Jeroboam built in Shechem in the mountains of Ephraim and dwelt there. And he went out from there and built Peniel. And Jeroboam said in his heart, Now the kingdom may return to the house of David. If these people go up to offer sacrifices in the house of the Lord at Jerusalem, then the hearts of this people will turn back to their Lord, Rehoboam, king of Judah, and they will kill me and go back to Rehoboam, king of Judah. Therefore the king asked advice, made 2 calves of gold, and said to the people, It is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Here are your gods, O Israel, which brought you up out of the land of Egypt. And he set up one in Bethel, and the other he put in Dan. Now this thing became a sin, for the people went to worship before the one as far as Dan. He made shrines on the high places and made priests from every class of people who were not of the sons of Levi. Jeroboam ordained sacrificing to the calves that he had made, and at Bethel he installed the priest of the high places which he had made. So he made offerings on the altar which he had made at Bethel on the 15th day of the 8th month, in the month which he had devised in his own heart, and he ordained a feast for the children of Israel, and offered sacrifices on the altar and burnt incense. So shortly, of course we all know, shortly after, Shortly after Solomon died, Israel divided into 2 kings. Rehoboam succeeded Solomon, listened to bad advice, and provoked rebellion, if you will. Jeroboam, a rebel exile to Egypt under Solomon, became leader of the 10 tribes. And Jeroboam set up a new religion in the north to keep the Israelites away from Jerusalem. So Jeroboam's religion had the characteristics typical of most counterfeit religions, and we're going to look at those characteristics so that hopefully if we notice these characteristics are repeated in a lot of today's religions as well. And so if we know these characteristics, we might be able to spot other counterfeit religions. The first thing I might want to point out is that Jeroboam's religion was subtle. It wasn't, in your face. It wasn't grotesquely different. It was subtly different. The first point I'll make is that subtle in its propaganda. Jeroboam promoted calves. This was not foreign to the children of Israel. Matter of fact, if you remember down in Exodus chapter 32, verse 4, it says, And he received gold from their hand and fashioned in engraving tools and made a molded calf. Then he said, This is your God, O Israel, that brought you up out of the land of Egypt. So if you recall, those are the same, these were the words of Aaron. Those were the same words of Jeroboam. So this wasn't something that was foreign unto them. He promoted promoters of modern religion will often say, well, it comes from the same Bible. We all read, and we all have the same Bible. But it's just adopted for new times. We just updated things. It's kind of new, if you will. So and that's like the scriptures say, a little leaven leaveneth the whole loaf. A little bit of change. Sometimes we have liberty to make change in some areas, and sometimes we don't. But just realize that most counterfeiters, there's only a little bit of change. Just like when people counterfeit the dollar bill, or actually they don't counterfeit the dollar bill, but it's usually $100 bills. There's subtle differences. If it was easy to spot, then most people wouldn't get caught up and realize, oh, I got counterfeit money. They would, but there's usually only slight variances. Same thing when it comes to counterfeit religion. It may sound the same. They'll even use the same book, but there are differences nonetheless that would cause us to go in a different way that God would have us to do. The next point I want to point out is that counterfeit religion is usually similar in features. Again, there's subtle differences. So most people that talk about Christianity or say that they are a New Testament church, they have communion. They worship on the first day of the week. They have lessons from the same Bible. But yet, modern religion is often different. Quite different. They're different emphasis. They quote verses out of context. Just as Jeroboam, he, they weren't, if you recall, it was a sin to worship the golden calf back when Aaron tried to do it. Now Jeroboam's doing it. Sin is sin. But nonetheless, the people were, I don't know, we weren't there to witness, but maybe hoodwinked or convinced to do otherwise. So, worship, church structure, and work of the church are often this is where we start seeing a lot of differences. Yeah, they might use the same Bible. Yeah, they might do some of the same practices, but yet the church structure, maybe denominationalism has usually a central governing body that is not part of the local church in which they receive direction from. The works of the church, how are funds used? How are they expending the Lord's money? Those type things. Often when we start pulling back the veil, we start seeing, oh wow, this is totally different. On the outside, it may look the same, but on the inside, it's completely different. So we need to be careful and realize that often counterfeit or things that are fake in nature are quite different and are maybe subtle in their changes, but are still quite different. The difference is made, if we look to Jeroboam, if you recall what we just read from our proof text, they had priests, but instead of, the text pointed out that it made priests of every kind of people. So you can probably imagine there was probably some in the children. Well, why only the Levites? Why did only the Levites get to be a priest? I would like to be a priest, but I'm of the tribe of Dan, But Jeroboam would have placated to that. Disregard what God had commanded, disregard what God had said. Remember, and we always need, there's the proverb writer says that there's a way of man that man thinks is wise, but is folly unto God. God's ways is not man's ways. And so he had priests, he had altars, he even appointed feasts similar, very similar feast in what they had practiced down in Jerusalem. Um, and same way, we see in Bibles today. I mean, in churches today, most that have preachers. They all provide service. They all teach out of the Bible or the New Testament. But again, they're still quite different. The differences that made a difference, similarly or not, in Jeroboam's case, Jeroboam's religion had a different object, different places, and different types of priests that different from what God himself ordained. If you remember, the text said, and Jeroboam ordained these things, not that God had ordained these things. And so modern religion has different worship, sings, some even conduct concerts, if you will, different church structures, and like I said, different works of the church. The next thing we point out is that Jeroboam's religion was sensational. In other words, it was appealing to people. People, oh wow, that's a great idea. Oh, this is fun. Oh, I had such a good time there. That type of thing. False religion often characterized by sensationalism and emotionalism. They want to really stir up the emotions. I think that's a lot of emphasis behind the music and stuff. Music often invokes emotions, if you will, and there's a reason why people gravitate towards those things. The TV evangelists, there's usually almost like an orchestra or a large band production, if you will. Is that there to provoke worship unto God, or is it there to provoke emotions to those that are in the crowd? Is that there in order to entertain those who are in the crowd? Again, the Bible that I read emphasizes psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. It doesn't emphasize words and harmony and melody, if you will. It's about the lyrics. It's about the words that were to admonish one another. And how do you admonish with notes and rhythm? But you admonish with words, right? And meaning. So Israel could not see and feel the gods down in Jerusalem, because God is the invisible God. But yet they could feel and touch the God of Jeroboam's, and that would have, of course, made a personal connection, if you will. And probably for some, that would be, that's what a great thing this is. In modern religion, often conversion, preaching, worship, assurance-based are more on feelings than reasoning. If we go, Paul taught to the Bereans, but what did the Bereans do? Did they say, oh, well, what Paul's saying feels good. What Paul says, it sounds good. Is that what they did? No. They went back and they confirmed to the scriptures what Paul was teaching was true and accurate, and then they believed. But so often that is not the case in our modern times. People, we get all caught up in the emotionalism, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't have emotion in our religion practice. Absolutely not. We are to have heartfelt religion. Don't get me wrong. God does not want, that was one of the rebukes that he gave towards the end in the Old Testament, in the minor prophets, is that they were just simply going through the motions, that they weren't doing it from the heart. So we are to have heartfelt religion, heartfelt worship of God. That's not what I'm saying. But we shouldn't be caught up in emotionalism for me. It's not about the emotions that stirred up. It's not seeking out an euphoric high because of the endorphins that I receive because I'm having fun. That's what I'm trying to point out here. True religion is characterized by reasoning from the scriptures. Like I say, that's what the Bereans did. Over in Acts chapter 17 and verse 2, it says, "Then Paul, as his cousin was, he went to them for 3 Sabbaths and reasoned with them from the scriptures." Again, he didn't provoke up, sensationalism, if you will. He used the scriptures to reason with them, to get them to understand what it was. And if they would have understood the Old Testament, then they would have seen the signs of the things that had taken place that would have confirmed that this was the Christ. Again, that's what's repeated there in 18 verse 4. He says, "And he reasoned in the synagogues every Sabbath to persuade both Jews and Greeks." Again, he used reasoning, not sensationalism, to persuade people, but reasoning. Over verse 19 of chapter 18, it says, and he came to Ephesus and left them there, but he himself entered the synagogues and reasoned with the Jews. And then, chapter 24 and verse 25, we often point this one out, but it says, "Now as he reasoned about the righteousness, self-control, and the judgment to come," in other words, he was reasoning the Gospels with Felix. "Felix was afraid and answered, 'Go away for now, for I have until when I have a convenient time, I will call for you.'" In other words, he probably provoked, he probably shook up Felix a little bit with his reasoning. Felix was like, "Oh, whoa," what he says is true, but then it wasn't political expedient for Felix, and that's why he sent him away. Feelings are necessary, but reason must control the feelings and not vice versa. Again, we're not saying that we should be without any type of feeling. That's not what's commanded in the scriptures. But we shouldn't be seeking feelings in order to provoke up like an euphoria type sensation, or to release endorphins so that we feel good about ourselves. That's not what religion is about. Religion is all about God, and not so much about you as the individual. So first principles, there should be emphasis on first principles, emphasis on worship, preaching, and the etc. should be done with feeling, but not from but from a converted mind, if you will. Next, I want to point out is that Jeroboam's religion was convenient. Often, counterfeit, things. Even in today's society, the more convenient you make it, the more people participate in it, right? Why does Dollar General have a store in every corner, in the country? The more convenient people have access to them, the more people that are going to go and buy their products. Same thing when it comes to religion, and that's what Jeroboam, Jeroboam, hey, don't go down, don't worry about going down to Jerusalem. We'll do it right here. It'll be a lot more convenient for you. And that's exactly his religion. In verse 28 of our reading, he said, "It is too much. It is too much for you to go and do this." And, my first point up here is, I apologize, there was a very light spot there. It is often more convenient to follow the denominational teachings. They don't, it's more of a look good, feel good type preaching than it is, you're doing, this is not what you should be doing. This is not what you should be doing. This is not what you should do. This is how you should be worshiping God. This is what God would have you do. That's why a lot of people will say, well, you Church of Christers, it's always a negative sermon. No, it's not really. It's not really a negative sermon. It's not negative. If you're doing what you're supposed to do, then it's not a negative sermon. It might be viewed as a negative sermon if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, and that's why we preach and teach those things, is so that we may know what it is that we ought to do and what not to do. But for the guy who is doing what he ought to do, it's not a negative sermon. It's, oh, yeah, I'm doing it. Oh, yeah, right, yeah, got it. For the guy who's not doing that, it's going, yeah, well, yeah, I should be doing that. Well, yeah, I did that. That type of thing. But some places, they don't even teach it. All they teach is, God is love. God loves everybody. God, a God of love that will accept it and do and see and be anything that you want it to do. Again, it's like Baskin Robbins. Why does Baskin Robbins offer 31 different flavors of ice cream? Well, the appeal is that if you come into our store, instead of finding one or two flavors of ice cream, we have one that appeals to everybody. And so the same thing when it comes to denominational teachings. Salvation and church membership. Church, the denominationalism of, church of choice, it doesn't matter what church you attend. We all believe the same Bible. It doesn't matter. Disregard that maybe they don't teach 99% of the Bible. When it comes to salvation, all you need is faith. All you have to do is believe. Believe and let Jesus into your heart. What verse in the Bible says that? Can anybody open up their Bible and point to the verse that says, if you only believe, that's all you have to do? No, but James certainly has a refute to that, does he not? James chapter 2 verse 24 says, you see then the man who is justified by works and not by faith only. Belief plus action is true faith. But there are a lot of people out there that will peddle the idea that, all you have to do is believe. To TV evangelists, if you pray with me right now and let Jesus into your heart, you will be saved. Where is that in the Bible? Or some say, it's a big inconvenience to be lowered into that watery grave of baptism. We practice sprinkling so much easier, so much more expedient. Why worry about getting your whole body wet when you can just come over here? We'll just rub a little bit of water on your head. You'll be good to go. But yet the Bible says, over in Colossians chapter 2, verse 12, it says, buried with him in baptism, not sprinkled, buried. What does it mean to be buried? In which you were raised with him through faith in the working of God, who raised him from the dead. Thus the imagery of being lowered into that watery grave of baptism. When it comes to worship, listen to organ or choir. Again, the entertainment. Nowadays, it's more like a rock concert. I remember I had a friend down in Georgia, and he was telling me, oh man, we had such a great worship service last night at church. And this was one of those mega churches where a couple thousand people attend. I videotaped it, and he started playing it, and there was all these lights and strobes going. There was a big rock band up on the stage, and people were jumping and up and down. Have you ever heard of a rave? It's a form of, it's where a bunch of people get together and they're like, they push and shove, and I mean, but it's all to music, and that's basically what they were doing there at that thing. There wasn't preaching, there wasn't teaching going on. It's strictly entertainment. And yeah, that probably felt good. It was probably a lot of joy jumping around and having a good time with people around you. I'm sure that it was. But is that what God would have us to do? Is that what God had commissioned the New Testament church to do? I don't see that in my Bible. Some, well, it's kind of an inconvenience to do the Lord's Supper every Sunday. We'll just do it once a quarter, or we'll do it once every 6 months. Maybe, well, we'll just wait and do it once a year. That type of thing. It is often, more convenient for Christians to sin than it is to do right. And that's why a lot of these requirements in these churches aren't reinforced. It's more convenient to conform than to be transformed, but yet that's what the Bible tells us that we need to do. Romans chapter 12 verse 2 says, "And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed in the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is good and acceptable and perfect will of God." That last part, that you may prove what is good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Not the will of man, not the will of Jim Love, but the will of God. What would God have me to do? But yet it's more convenient not to assemble. I'll just turn on my TV. How many people have heard people say that? I don't go to church, but I turn on the TV and I watch the local yada yada yada. We won't teach this Sunday. We'll just have this. We've brought in this special band here. They're going to entertain us this weekend. James says perfect religion is not worshiping, but visiting orphans and widows during in their affliction. I like to go to Wednesday evening, but I like gathering with the people. But Bible study is just so boring. Over here we get together and we play bingo. Over at this church. I ain't got time. You know what? Now, I have not found a church yet that doesn't practice giving. Has anybody found one of those that says, no, we don't want your money? No. Matter of fact, probably, if it's one of those mega churches, they're probably putting a lot of emphasis on that part as opposed to the rest of this. But, what does the Bible teach us? We have to be holistic Christians. We can't pick and choose the parts that we want to excel at. We have to try to excel at all parts of it. So it's a holistic concept, So counterfeit religion. In conclusion, we got to be careful. It's real easy to be persuaded by things. Again, they're subtle in nature. A lot of sensationalism. They really package and sell themselves really well. But the bottom line is God has given specific requirements for what the church is to do. And you should be searching your scriptures. Is the church that I attend, are they doing this, this, and this? Is the church that I'm attending, do they practice the things that are prescribed in the New Testament? If it is, then that's the church that I probably should continue to be at. If they're not, then it might be a counterfeit religion. Jeroboam's religion was also more popular among the Jews, if you will. Granted, it was the tribes. There was 10 tribes to 2. But if you can imagine, even with 10 tribes, how many more people would have been involved in Jeroboam's religion than opposed to the the true religion down in Jerusalem. And again, why was that? Why is it that we see these mega churches? Why are they able to put 10, 20, 30,000 people into a stadium? But we're lucky if we can get 30. Why is that? Christians often want churches to be big, popular as their denominational neighbors, and they could be. They very well could be, but they should be for the right reasons. They shouldn't be just. It's not about how many people are in the pews, but it's about the spiritual purity of the members. And finally, Christians need to look to see what makes them so. What makes you a Christian? Is it attending a big mega church? Is it being part of a look good, feel good religion? Or is it adhering to what God would have you to do? What makes you a Christian? Ask, should we do what it takes? I would say yes. We should do whatever it takes in order to receive that crown of life at the end. So that's the lesson. I hope that the lesson has been profitable for you. Again, I don't think we have a problem with counterfeit religion here, but maybe some friends, maybe some relatives do, and maybe you can point, maybe if you can